Hey, loyal toy fans, welcome to another action-packed episode of Spector Creative, and today we're going to talk about the awesome present value of finances. Why would I talk about this? Well, let's talk about comic books first, and let's talk specifically about Marvel Comics. Marvel Universe is made up of awesome characters. You got Spider characters, Hulk characters, mutant characters, Avenger characters, cosmic characters. We like to put them into different categories. But interestingly, for Marvel's 75th, two of the big categories, the Fantastic Four and the X-Men, were nowhere to be seen. And a lot of people had their, conspiracy theories and thoughts and feelings about this, why suddenly two of the biggest franchises were not being published. Now, it's not the first time we've had Marvel paraphernalia that lacked a mutant or a member of Marvel's first family on the cover, but traditionally, when you're looking at the Marvel Universe, as I said, we like to bucket our Marvel characters, Spider characters, X-Men characters, Fantastic Four, Avengers, Cosmic, Streets, the spiritual, Ghost Rider-y characters, Knights of Vengeance. Well, when Disney purchased Marvel, two of their large bucketed characters, Fantastic Four and X-Men, were not available for purchase. Well, they owned them, but because Marvel went bankrupt several years ago, they had sold off the movie rights to certain bucketed groups of characters. Specifically, Spider-Man and his franchise was at Sony, and X-Men and Fantastic Four were at Fox. Now, these deals done back in the 90s essentially meant Disney couldn't make movies or content based on these characters. They could still publish comic books, they could still license them out for towels, underoos, action figures, and Fruit Loops, but yeah, Marvel was now big again, making billions at the box office, yet it was basically the Avengers that were going to have to take the lead. The characters like the Spider-Man universe and the X-Men universe, which was huge in the 90s thanks to the animated series. Well, you notice if you picked up most Marvel product that was released around the time of the purchase, 2014, 2015, yeah, you basically saw Guardians of the Galaxy, Hulk, Avengers, Spider-Man. You really didn't see that many X-Men characters. Sometimes we'd get a Wolverine, and I'm going to talk about this specific retro wave later in the video, so definitely put a pin in this. We're going to return to this. It's kind of important. But yeah, there really weren't too many mutants on shelf. And as I said, there's very big reasons for this. It's not just that these characters were banned. Well, okay, they were. But it's actually rooted in the way every American corporation works. So let's kind of dig into it a little bit. For the 75th, which happened during, right after the Disney purchase, both the Fantastic Four and the X-Men were not featured on any of the collateral, and there were all these rumors that Marvel was actually telling artists not to draw these characters or to include them, and all sorts of weird leaks were happening. And, well, the idea that Marvel would try to snub Fox by not publishing the Fantastic Four, that felt like, they would never do that. No one would throw the thing under a bus. No one put Sue Storm in a corner. Well, yeah, they actually kind of did do this, and it's been confirmed by numerous Marvel writers and artists, and many of them came forward with photos and snapshots of memos that were passed around that essentially said, yes, you do not include the Fantastic Four, and you actually can't create new X-Men characters, because the thing is, if you create an X-Men character, that can be a toy, and it can be in the movie automatically, because the way the movie rights work with Fox, any X-Men character is available to them. So if someone was to create a new X-Men character, well, suddenly it could be fodder for one of the X-Men movies and therefore X-Men action figures. And, well, Disney was doing its best to try to protect its assets, which meant that, yes, not only were the X-Men toned down, they were still being published, because they're still pretty darn popular. They didn't want to, just burn money. But the edict was no new characters. In the 90s, we got so many new characters, Cable and Deadpool and Cable. Did I mention Deadpool? I think so. But when an artist sat down to create a new character, they were told, nope, can't be a member of the X-Men. You can create new Avengers characters. You can create new Guardians of the Galaxy characters. But yeah, we're not going to create new X-Men characters ever again. And that was like, whoa, that's it? So the X-Men universe is no longer growing? Marvel did have a way of trying to get around this, and it's, called Inhumans. Do you remember the Inhumans television series? Yes, again, this leaked out in numerous memos that as much as Marvel was trying to get Inhumans to happen as the new X-Men, in other words, characters sort of born with their powers, I think they got it from those shards or I don't know, whatever. The point is, yeah, it wasn't going to happen. The Inhumans are not the X-Men. I mean, I'm sorry. Black Bolt and Wolverine are not, equal characters as far as fandoms. So while there was definitely a big push, both in terms of content and there were toys in development, some made it out like a Walgreens Medusa figure, well, the classic comic book version. Inhumans basically was DOA and was quickly abandoned. And then, of course, when Disney purchased Fox, everybody got welcomed because now suddenly all of the characters that were owned by Fox, or at least the movie rights, suddenly went to Disney. And this is why we finally got X-Men movie toys based on the Fox properties after so many years. And while we were all excited to get more, since I think the last one was like that Iceman that was at KB from X-Men 2. And X-Men 3 had like one Beast figure in Marvel Legends. They barely had any toys. So people were wondering, for years, why we didn't get X-Men toys from the live action. And that's why. And now that Disney owned Fox, the doors were wide open. Granted, while there was pent-up demand and they did a good job of doing, variants, like by including extra heads, they weren't exactly the greatest sellers, which is why we only saw one wave for more or less one season. After that, they pretty much went away, although the branding was used for classic X-Men in order to try to create a sub-brand at retail. But again, because of the overshipment of some of the secondary characters, and I will say it, some of the female characters that were being sold in the boys' action aisle, well, those aren't exactly the most attractive to the core audience of young boy buying. All right. So, back to Disney and all of their ownership. We talked about the X-Men, but we really haven't touched on the Fantastic Four too much, and that's because it wasn't just the banning of new characters. Not that there's that many new Fantastic Four characters. Well, I guess, Silver Surfer, et cetera, et cetera. There were other ones besides the four. Well, Marvel writers were told just not even to use them at all, and Marvel didn't even publish the Fantastic Four for years. They didn't really kill them off. They were more just sort of I think that Ben became like a bridge or something in the negative zone. I forget. But we did get a few toys of them. It's weird how they treated X-Men and Fantastic Four so differently because Fantastic Four wasn't published, but we still got toys as long as they were at alternative retailers, meaning they didn't want toys at mass retail, Walmart and Target and Toys R Us. But Walgreens, did I say Walmart? Walgreens. Walgreens was allowed to have Fantastic Four as part of a customized program. So while in the comic books they were, definitely going to fade away and take a little bit of let's say a well-deserved rest. Let's put it that way to put a positive spin on it. In the toy aisle, they would still exist a little bit, and a big part of that was because with Fox, as long as they had a Fantastic Four movie in development, they would hold the rights, which is why they kept putting out Fantastic Four movies, or at least working on them. So an interesting way I kind of got involved in all of this, at the tail end of my time in California, I was working with Entertainment Earth and helping them to develop their in-house brands like Pinmates. And for San Diego Comic-Con, the year Infinity War came out in theaters, we wanted to do an Infinity Gauntlet Pinmate set because, it made sense. It was going to be the biggest movie. And honestly, I looked around and I was surprised that there weren't that many toys based on the comic book when the movie was coming out because I loved this comic. It was like one of my first big Marvel comics when I was a kid. And it had essentially, the 90s, like the entire Marvel universe. So while we were allowed to produce the set, we had to produce the mutant characters, Wolverine, Cyclops, and Wanda, in a different set. We couldn't put them in the main one because of the whole rights issues. You couldn't mix a mutant with a Marvel Universe character. You could make the mutants, they just couldn't be in it. So you'll notice the set is missing them, but we were allowed to have spaces. So you'll notice there's a spot for Wanda there, right above Spider-Man and Captain America. So they could all be plugged in. What you won't see, though, are the Fantastic Four characters, like also-mentioned Silver Surfer or Firelord, another one of Galactus's heralds. It's when you combine the word Galactus and Herald together. So we also couldn't use the artwork for the original cover because it featured Fantastic Four characters and X-Men characters with Marvel Universe. Luckily, we found this existing art from the trade paperback. Otherwise, we didn't know what we were going to do because we didn't have a budget to create art. But luckily, this piece was found, and we're like, oh, good, let's use that. It exists. And Marvel had it. We weren't the only ones, meaning Entertainment Earth. All toy makers were basically under this edict that they could do Infinity Gauntlet toys, but no, you can't have X-Men in the toy set, no Fantastic Four at all. So while we included the X-Men characters as a second add-on purchase, most other toy companies took the easy route and just went with the A-list characters. All right, so back to this Hasbro assortment, and so the reason I wanted to put a pin in this is I actually use this as an example with Marvel. I said, well, wait a minute. Like, Wolverine is shipping in an assortment with Marvel Universe and Spider-Man characters. And Marvel basically was like, yeah, don't bring up a Hasbro example. They have special exceptions. Click. I was like, okay. So, but it makes sense because Hasbro is, their major toy partner. But still, exceptions. It's frustrating when you can't do something others can. Now, it seems a little bit like, cutting off your nose to spite your earlobes because of not putting out characters that are popular and will sell and will make you money. But that's exactly it. It all comes down to that, and it all comes down to corporate finance. Now, personally, I am so glad that this time is over and that now that Disney owns Fox, we can get Fantastic Four characters again, because I love the Fantastic Four, and I waited years to be able to get the classic and 90s versions. And people know I'm a big collector of XMen characters, so one Wolf's Bane, one Banshee, and one Blob and Avalanche, and I think I'm pretty set. All right, so back to what I was talking about corporate finance, and thanks for hanging in till the end, because this is the really important stuff. We all know that most major companies own every other company. This is not a Disney thing or a Marvel thing. I don't want anyone to think I'm, ragging on anyone. I'm just telling a story, and that story involves what's called net present value. So that is how every corporation works. And it's a little different than how we tend to think both companies and finance works, because we don't really deal with the formula. And I'm not going to get into it, believe me. You can go Google this or, go get an MBA and you can learn all about it. It's hoots of fun, believe me. But it essentially talks about that the money you have now is way better than any future money you're going to have. And you might be like, what? But, let's say I have 9 million right now, and in 10 years, I'll have 15 million. Isn't that better? Well, no, because that's in your imagination. The bridge to the future, or, the portal to the future, is one DeLorean away from going off the tracks. And you don't know what's going to happen. I mean, aliens could attack at any moment. Galactus could eat the Earth, or the King of England could, well, no, wait, he is the King of England. Never mind. The point being is that the idea of money and time being equal, money now is the most valuable thing in the world. You don't know how much you're going to have later. So while we feel like money today is the most important thing, sell X-Men, sell Fantastic Four, it's not. Every major corporation looks at money tomorrow as more important, which is why protecting assets today always takes precedent. So that is why characters like X-Men and Fantastic Four, when they weren't fully owned by Disney, had to take a backseat. It had nothing to do with, spurring the characters. It's all about corporate finance. Every major company looks at assets this way. Definitely not a Disney or a Marvel thing. So I want to make sure people know I'm not ragging on any one company. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks so much for watching. Share this if you can, and I'll see you in the next one.